Alright, what's going on, guys? It's Chef. We're back here over on some more Modern Warfare 3. Today we're just grinding a little bit. I don't want to play Stash House. Nope. Xbox today announced internally it is closing 4 Bethesda studios 3 years after acquiring the company Arcane Austin, Tango Gameworks, Alpha Dog, and Roadhouse. Yeah, people seem very upset at this. Xbox taking the EA route. Yeah, that's kind of what people were afraid of. See, I remember when I was growing up, I was always playing a whole lot of video games like my entire life. And I remember that my grandmother would always say like, oh, since you love video games so much, why don't you go and make them yourself? You know, why don't you get involved with like the development and all that shit? As much as I love video games, I have no interest whatsoever of being a dev. Would I rather be a dev or work at a desk job at like some shit that just like doesn't even really matter? Passion versus no passion? I guess I'd rather be a dev, but I would get my feelings hurt as a developer. Like easily I would get my feelings hurt. I know the stuff that I say about developers and their games and other things like that, my experience, and it's not even just that. I would have to like sit there and hold my tongue at people saying, if people got mad at the Helldiver developers for talking shit, you're lucky I'm not a dev. I would talk mad. See, back then when I was thinking about game development, I'm thinking about like code, and it's not what you think it is. There's a lot more to it than just like, oh, I have an engine, and then I place this block here, and this is just how it doesn't work like that. And then it was like, oh, you could become a game tester. That was one of the things that was like really popular at the time. They had commercials for it and everything where like you could test video games. But obviously I never chased that or anything like that. It didn't seem like a crazy job or anything. But now, since I'm looking at it, even being in like the higher developer status, number one, you're not safe. Number two, you still don't get paid very much for how much work you do. And number three, you're completely expendable. I was actually touching on this when I was talking about how it feels to be a Call of Duty player and have to deal with the fact that there's 3 different studios, or technically 4 different studios with 4 different design philosophies working on a game that you actively play. And it feels weird a lot of the time because you end up getting a lot of whiplash. Even though the game at base is generally the same, the philosophies and designs and stuff like that change a lot. Every single year for Call of Duty as an annual release game with, I mean, admittedly is pretty high quality in the end, and to be able to produce a game like this year over year is pretty impressive. Requires a whole lot of coordination, manpower, all that stuff. Tons of talent, even if the game ends up being shit overall. And the way that they're able to just shit these things out every single year is very impressive. And not to mention, all of that manpower is also not consistent manpower. Yeah, we got people that are in good positions that'll be like in a leadership role, but every single year we're worried about Call of Duty not having the same qualities that the last one did, or the year before that. We're sitting here worried about whether or not a game is going to have the same feature that it had last time. I think that's a combination of the fact that we have multiple studios that all have different design philosophies. But on top of that, not only does it have different design philosophies, it also has a massive revolving door of developers that are just a part of the teams to begin with. So I'm trying to think, if I'm a brand new developer that just randomly gets hired at, say, Infinity Ward or some shit like that, I've never worked on a Call of Duty game before, but they got it down to a T and they know how to go and make one from scratch. But all of the details in that process end up getting lost because even though it's technically the same design and everything, it's going to be made slightly differently. Kind of like if you have a tutorial on how to draw something and you have a bunch of different talented artists, they won't ever draw it exactly the same. Even the same artist won't draw shit the exact same way every single time. So because it's a revolving door of talent that come in and out, there's more and more inconsistencies that happen with all of the features in the game. I want to play video games, not create. I have zero interest in that shit. I would be better suited for something like a community manager role, but even then, I still don't want that. I'm just saying, if I had to be somewhere in this whole industry, community manager would probably be the closest thing that I could ever possibly do. Number one, I would just get fired for talking shit, and then also number two, I would also get fired because the roles just aren't permanent. They never are. Your talents are just thrown all around, all over the place. No matter how good or successful you are at your job, it won't matter. You're just gonna get tossed around and thrown somewhere else. You're replaceable. There's a million of you. There's nothing special about me whatsoever. That's how you're treated. Even if in truth, you actually do have some pretty exceptional skills that are special, they don't see it. They don't care. It doesn't matter. This shit is absolutely miserable. They're gonna shoot down all my streaks so quickly. It's disgusting. Whenever I get into a sweaty lobby, there's just no way that my streaks just never survive. So I think I'm actually gonna change these. I don't know what to change them into though. I could go back to the whole remote turret. Obviously I could go with the Wheelson, but the Wheelson is so cheese. It's not cool. The gameplay's terrible. It's just, yeah, nah, I don't like it. Go with the cluster mine, but the cluster mine really only benefits mostly on shipment. I mean, it works on all these maps, I guess, but I could go UAV, counter UAV into remote turret, and that's it. But it might get less kills. So for example, one of the studios that actually did really well in recreating the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1+2 game. The Tony Hawk games have lost their identity identity ever since, like, I don't know, like Project 8 or so. They tried to follow Skate when they should have just stuck to their own arcadey thing instead of trying to follow Skate with the whole, like, slow motion and, like, try to have some realism in the skateboarding or whatever. Even though we know ultimately Skate is not necessarily realistic either. But, like, the way that the buttons feel and respond and just the way that it is, Tony Hawk games were considered arcadey, whereas Skate games were considered a little bit more on the realistic side. It's not a bad thing to be arcade or a bad thing to be a realistic or anything like that. But basically, for years, Tony Hawk games ended up losing their identity overall with the way that the just arcadey elements of everything completely function. And they finally ended up being able to find a group of developers that actually made a real arcade Tony Hawk game. And then that whole team got disbanded to make fucking, I'm sorry, but they got disbanded to make fucking Crash Bandicoot. I'm sorry, I don't give a fuck about Crash. They closed the whole studio to move them over and smush them into some shit that develops like Spyro the Dragon and shit. Fuck off. Now, they didn't lose their jobs or anything like that, but clearly the people that ended up working on the Tony Hawk Pro Skater remakes knew what they were doing and had a passion for it. And now those people that actually have the formula, that know and understand it, they no longer are even put on a team anymore that is even interested in making some shit like that again. So it's gone. Basically, once they closed that, I had so much hope that they would end up actually bringing the classic Tony Hawk feel back. They finally captured that lightning in a bottle again, and then they just disband that whole team and put them elsewhere to work on some shit that they're not even half as passionate about. You could put down a cookbook in front of two people, tell them to go and make the same exact thing, follow it completely to a T, and somehow in the end, you will still end up tasting these small little differences between the way that the people made them. You can make them identically, and somehow in the end it will end up tasting worse. I feel like that's how video games are as well. Just most creation processes. You can have everything down on a list for all the developers to go and follow everything that was like the most popular shit in all of the Call of Duties, the most well-approved, most well-liked thing. They still won't be able to produce it the same exact way that they did before. And you could argue that that's just them trying to innovate or something like that, but in truth, it's not. Like with how slide canceling would be different or how it feels. It's such a small little thing, and it seems simple, but for some reason, it feels completely different from year to year, and on other games that on paper react the same way. That's how it is with developers whenever they're making games. There's like this touch of nuance to the way that a game feels other than saying what is happening just down on paper. And this whole industry is just a revolving door of people just getting used and then tossed out, thrown somewhere else. Your talents are just shifted and thrown all over the place. And you can never really get comfortable, and even if you do well, some people be like, oh, well, just make good games. Make a successful game. They have. We just watched entire teams that made potential Game of the Year contenders and award winners get laid off / split into a completely different genre of games where those people's talents won't even be recognized in the whatever project they're working on now. And the more money that got into this industry, the worse it's gotten. Not even just like talking about battle passes or something like that. I mean down to like just the way that the games and even how the developers feel when they're making the game. There's just way less passion in this shit, I swear. Like indie devs are the only people that you feel like there's actually passion involved. And then even if you end up getting a team that seems really passionate and they're backed by like big group, those people are still completely powerless to the powers above them. Shit just sucks.